All right. So
Hello.
welcome everyone.
Hi.
Yeah, so glad to see everyone. Excited to, yeah, and excited to have our team here, a full team. I mean, Sumit is attending in spirit, but he's still recuperating from his illness. So hopefully he'll start feeling better well. So it's so glad to have you here, Sumit. It was great.
Yeah.
So yeah, today's conversation we're gonna have Jonas Altman, but I'm excited for that. We're gonna kick things off in any moment now. So glad to have everyone join. And as we get started, let's go ahead and I'll start sharing my screen, and we can go ahead and kick things off while Jonas is getting his coffee, and we'll
very important. You can't start this without coffee. I mean, I'm with him there.
I know, I got mine right here. I mean, you have to have it close by, right? So it's got to be right there.
Cheers, everybody.
Hey, cheers. Cheers.
Love it. All right. Is yours? Oh, there we go. Okay. I was like, I just see a blank screen. I wasn't sure if it was just me.
All right.
Let's get it going. We've taken a sip of coffee. We're good to go. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the People Strategies Forum. And if you are joining us again, you've been here before, welcome back. And if it is your very first time, welcome. We're going to have a really great session today. We have a full panel. We have an awesome guest speaker for you. And a little bit about what we try and do here each and every week is we come together. We're a mastermind of leaders, and we're really dedicated to creating workplaces where people are going to thrive, where employers reward and customers love. So to introduce myself, my name is Jules. I am an on-camera coach, and I help moderate all the questions that come through. And I just want to let you all know, if you have any questions at all for our speaker or any of our other hosts, please put them in the chat box, because I'm going to be kind of looking throughout the hour and checking on your questions and making sure they get answered. But if you're on a different streaming platform like Facebook, LinkedIn, still write those questions in for us, and we'll make sure that we get those answered for you at the end of the session today. And to introduce you to your other hosts here on the panel, I'll start with Shah on the left there. So Shah not only consults with Comp Team, but she is an HR professional. We were actually talking a bit about HR before we started the live stream. And she founded her own company. So she's done a bit of everything, been in an office working for someone else, and now is really successful working for herself. And Sam, we have, Sam is the founder of Comp Team. He's the CEO of Comp Team as well. He's the reason why we get to have these sessions each and every week. And Sam really is a specialist in talent management, compensation programs and plans. And then Sumit, I'm so excited. I finally get to, it's been a while. So Sumit is actually, as Sam mentioned, he's just going to be off camera today. He's still recovering, but we are so glad that he's starting to get better. Sumit is not just a consultant with Comp Team, but he's been working in HR for many years, working with companies like Deloitte and Accenture. And we're just happy to have you here and listening to us and feeling the energy. So welcome, Sumit. Welcome back. And I'm going to now introduce you to today's guest speaker, who has actually spoken on the forum before. So welcome back. We have Jonas Altman, and he is a bit of everything. He's a founder, he's a facilitator, he's a coach, he's a speaker, he's an author. He actually has a best-selling book called Shapers, which dives in how to discover your passions and really craft a really lovely career around what you love to do, because what is the point of life if you're not enjoying what you do each and every day, right? And he's on a mission to make the world of work more human. And he's also had his work appear in Fast Company, The Guardian, and New York Post. So welcome back, Jonas. Thank you so much for giving us your time today. And we're excited for the discussion.
Thank you, Jules. Thanks for having me.
So Jonas, I mean, I know that I'm so glad that you came back to speak at another session. I mean, I think that in what you do and compared to what we speak on a regular basis is so much in line. I mean, really discovering your passions and knowing your talents and shaping that ideal career. So so for our listening audience, can you tell us a little bit about, what drove you to write your book and create your business and help the people that you help?
Yeah, well, Jules said a bit of everything. And one person can say, oh, isn't that sad you never decided what you wanted to be when you grew up? Another person could be like, hell yeah, that's me. And statistically, 8 out of 10 people don't have one career or one thing they want to do, whether it's paid work or being a home carer or a gardener or an amateur wine connoisseur. And so if that's the norm, then a bit of everything is actually no longer alternative in terms of a career trajectory. So whether you call it a shaper or a squiggly career or a jungle gym, I fit into that. And I thought for a long time, because I come from a family of professionals, like generationally, that I was the black swan, something was wrong with me. I never fit into a company. So it was a little bit of a, I guess, a struggle and or a learning opportunity for the first 2 careers I had, one in the music industry and one in the fashion industry. And my third career, which is the sort of teaching, writing, and speaking model of sorts, is in many ways getting paid to learn. So I found over the last decade that to have conversations, challenge my assumptions, show up as a teacher, show up as a coach, show up as a writer really suits me. And a lot of people resonate with that, and a lot of people do that. So I got gifted, and it sounds kind of maybe tone deaf, this global pandemic, which basically moved everyone from the way things were to the way things are. And for a lot of people, it's a lot better, a lot more nourishing. And for a lot of other people, it's completely disorientating and it's a struggle. And there's a sort of a scurry to be like, do I really want to be in my job? Do I know how to work remotely? Can we create empathy and connection within virtual teams? And so it's just like the whole lid's blown up. And I somehow found myself in the eye of the storm.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I know we were talking. I mean, of course, the pandemic has been a big topic, ongoing for a long time, but it has shaken up the world in a lot of negative waves and also a lot of positive ways as too. Now, we were just talking before the session with Jules and how or actually last session, Jules was talking about how it crafted her career and so forth and brought her to where she is today. But and one of the things that we were talking about is the traditional look upon careers is kind of it's kind of like going to McDonald's and getting the Happy Meal. It's in a box. You're a police officer. This is what you do. Here's your toy, and it's like they're all these careers are kind of like in a little box in the past. And now I think through the pandemic we found that hey, we really want to have a career out of things that we love to do, the way that we want to have an impact on the world, and where we can bring the most value and so forth, and developing that career around ourselves. So I think we were just talking before you came on, Jonas, about Jules and how this kind of crafted for her. So Jules, can you kind of tell us a little bit about your story as far as you were talking about how you crafted your career. I mean, you've been in front of the camera, you've been behind the camera as a producer. You found this new world of coaching, as Jonas was talking about. So how did that come to play for you?
I'm loving it already because I feel like Jonas, coming from like music industry, fashion industry, like these industries are ones where you kind of have to wear many hats in order to be successful. It's like it's really hard to be like a good actor if you don't know how to self-tape an audition, which every audition now is on a self-tape. It's not, you go in person anymore. There's a casting assistant with the camera. It's just not that anymore. You have to kind of fend for yourself and figure out all these new skills. And actually it was kind of already going that way before COVID for some reason, I guess because a lot of projects are shooting all around the world now. So I was kind of already, you know, learning how to tape things myself, edit. Yeah, it just kind of like, I was forced into it. I didn't really have a choice. And the thing too, like I was saying before we went on our live stream, the thing with being in front of the camera, there's obviously a lot of opportunities, but sometimes it really comes down to a certain look, if they want male or female, a certain ethnicity. So sometimes you can be so talented, but that doesn't even matter because they know they want a male for that role or whatever. So I realized, like, you know, as good as you are in front of the camera, sometimes you just have to go, you know what, I'm going to take matters into my own hands and start creating my own stuff. So I started forming relationships with other artists that needed, you know, someone to produce a music video or a lifestyle video for an influencer. And I just started branching out a little and realizing actually just in that trial and error, I found passion in being in behind the camera. So it's just another form of creating for me. And same thing as Jonas was saying, you know, like you always felt like the black swan that, you know, you don't fit in this one thing. And I always put pressure on myself, like I have to figure it out. I have to be like one thing. And I think it gave me more anxiety. But now that I've been like, okay, I'm going to give myself grace. I like to do a couple of different things, and giving myself that variety is actually what fuels me, and it gives me energy. Because I believe variety is the spice of life. I couldn't just, you know, enter the same spreadsheet day in, day out for 30 years. That would just make me miserable. So I just love the variety. I get to meet all sorts of people, and it just energizes me much more. And I feel like I perform better, I show up better, because I'm allowing myself to not just be that one thing and box myself in. Because like who told us that we had to do that anyway? You know, like we're on this planet for a short amount of time. There's a lot of passions we can have. I'm not saying you have to monetize all your passions. Like, you know, like I want to pick up learning the violin. I know I'm not going to ever be in an orchestra, but I want to like learn how to play just for that creative outlet, just for that, you know, develop a new passion. So yeah, that I guess out of being forced, it kind of helped me create opportunities for myself.
Yeah. So Jonas, I mean, I know that this is, you know, Jules is telling us about how she's shaped her career over the past few in the past few months. So tell us, Jonas, I mean, what does it mean to be a shaper? What is that? What do you mean by that when you're talking about your book and you're in that context?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of language that Jules just used, which is spot on. But I could say that the literature out there is like, follow your passion and never work a day in your life. But actually it's meaning and purpose that stand the test of time. And that's something that we project onto our work. So if we put all of us in the camp of multi-potentialites or multiple careerists, then yes, we might bump into our passion and like start doing something, or we might have a natural productivity for coaching and just find that as soon as we start coaching, it's like, wow, like I actually really like how this feels. So shapers in general, to use Jules's language, is they get energized by what they do. So that's checkbox one. They get to express themselves typically daily or on the regular instead of stuffing who they are or what they want, which often some organizations don't allow for, some do. So that's checkbox number two. And then the final one is to believe and to maybe validate that you're making a difference in the world. Checkbox number three. At all of that, if you wrap it nicely in a, you know, Christmas present, would be work as a practice, not as a place you go, not as a job you have, not as a time that you do work. It's emergent, it's amorphous. And that's what we're seeing. Is like, if I want to do this talk and then go for an hour coaching call after in the park, which one is work? Is this work? Not really, this is fun. Is the other one work? Well, actually that's fun, but it gets paid. So someone looking can say like, get a job. And I say, pardon my French, fuck off. So, I mean, it's a bit of a mindset shift. And in some ways it could also be a narrative fallacy where you have to engineer this to make sense. So back to Jules's comment, you know, the anxiety that comes by trying to conform is doing yourself a disservice and others, and modeling it for the next generation to subordinate who you are to fit into a system of post-industrialism that's no longer fit for our modern world. So instead, by having more Juleses around, that Juleses is hard to say, but like many Jules, people can say, wait, it's not just I want to be an Instagram influencer or YouTuber. I mean, that's sexy, but like I can actually have a yoga practice. I can have a part-time marketing job or part-time HR job, and be a caretaker for my children, or volunteer in the community. And all of those in some create the sort of shaping life. And it's very hard for someone to point a finger and saying, you are this.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And you guide people, and part of your coaching practice is guiding people to become a shaper, right? And you have some programs there that you do that. And can you tell us a little bit about your process?
Yeah. So, I mean, the shift from consulting to coaching would be the weight is on the expert to solve the problem. So for paid performance or performance marketing or anything would be like, okay, Sam has the domain knowledge. Let's cast you and compensate you for your day rate or hourly rate. And I did that for a while, but there was something missing. It wasn't really a true value exchange. There was a little bit of dependability. And then as you move towards coaching, the onus falls on the client to do the work, whether it's meditation, whether it's having a hard conversation with their boss. And that to me was like, okay, now I'm creating self-reliance, or helping to create self-reliance. And I'm in effect designing myself out of a gig, which is a terrible business model, but much more rewarding. So you have a funnel of clients, and most of these clients are in a inflection point in their career. So they're either in an industry that's the right industry, but in the wrong job, and they need to do some job crafting and redesign or reconfigure their job. They're yearning to do something on their own and finally, make the leap, but they need a little bit of confidence or competence or something. Or they're an entrepreneur and they're a natural born leader and they're a pirate and they need support systems and to build their resiliency and expose some of their blind spots, which is in many ways some of the people I work with who are actually coaches who are smart enough to know that they don't know everything. And I have to have one of those later today. And I always find those exhausting. Like I come off that call and I'm like, I need a vacation. Because what they're doing, they're provoking me to move out of here's what I'm seeing and what you should do, to something like, have you considered another alternative, and have them come up with something, because they know their industry or their world much better than I.
Yeah.
So that's how I do that. And then the coaching program, which we've launched, we're in our second cohort, is trying to create a community of practice, because just like therapy is one-to-one, it's like the person talks and then the therapist talks and then the person cries and the therapist gives a tissue. A coaching community of practice allows for peer coaching, which is very popular in today's Zoom world. And it allows for an energy a lot like a fitness class, where you kind of feel obligation if you are motivated by external obligations, that you don't want to let down other people because you're expecting them to share. And although it might not be for everyone, I found it to be very powerful for regulating your emotions, regulating your anxieties, and stepping outside of your sort of ego into like another perspective, even if it's for an hour. So that's how that world sort of unfolded. And it's only been, I think in 2016, 17, I discovered coaching by being coached. And they're like, I think you'd be a good coach, or I think you should look into coaching. And so that person is in many ways a person, her name's Allison. And she's a facilitator. So she shows up as a facilitator who knows that when she's facilitating a meeting or a process, that the coach approach or the coach hat can be very powerful, of asking a question instead of telling. And so she's trained as a coach to have that modality.
That's great. That's fascinating, because I know in situations like where Shar is as a leader of Rocky Mountain Health Advocates, I mean, she is trying to bring out the best in her people, understand their talents, and so forth. And so a lot of times she's helping them discover that. And then also in last week's conversation with Jules, she was telling us about a mastermind, an entrepreneurship mastermind that she attended, where she had the question, well, I don't know what I'm good at. I don't. And then they said, well, you're great at this and this and this. And so you're telling us also the same thing. How do you help people find their talents and passions through your program? I mean, what are those mechanisms that you use?
Oh yeah, great. I mean, Jules alluded to like trial and error, or you fail your way to success, or you try on many hats. So one exercise is actually borrowed from a Walt Whitman poem, and the line goes, "I contain multitudes." And so the idea is that there's many selves, many Sams living within Sams. The 4-year-old boy, the soccer player, the mountain climber, the mountain biker, that might be dormant. And so the question is, what are you going to give life to that you haven't? And what might you narrow and in some ways stop doing because it's a distraction? So it's a little bit of an assessment at the beginning of what qualities make you you, which is like, I mean, when I did this exercise, it was a little bit uncomfortable, but it ended up being personified by Indiana Jones. So a maverick, mischievous, adventurous. And it was like, own that, like step into the qualities that no one else in the world can have, because no one has your nature and nurture mix. And that's your currency, especially in a knowledge economy, assuming you don't work in a factory. So that's like a lot of people who are either young in their career, like they've just graduated, or they're still timid in terms of owning their currency. But you see 22-year-old life coaches, and someone can say, well, you haven't even lived, a quarter of the time I've lived on this planet, but somehow through their learning or their confidence or their willingness to sustain judgment, they own that. And, you could say fake it till you make it, but in many ways, Mary Folio, she's a huge coach. She started when she was in her early 20s. Anyway, so that's one. And then within about 90 days, which is usually the agile movement, we do 60 days. You're saying, well, who's the person I'm becoming? And you do accountability both with your pod. So you do triads, which is a very powerful way. We're 4 on the screen right now, assume it's there. So it's a really powerful way to have other people's perspectives in the atmosphere, so that you can say, okay, what have I delivered on? What have I been thinking about? How am I doing? Where do I need help? And a lot of those questions, when they happen on your own, you just make a longer list, and then you watch a TED talk or you listen to a podcast, and you either feel deflated because you're far off, you feel super motivated, but you're doing it alone. And so the quote that we use is, regeneration doesn't happen in isolation. It's a team sport. So, I can tell you 2 stories. One woman quit her job at Oracle and got a Airstream and took her daughter on a road trip and is starting to write and paint finally. Another woman quit her incubator in the Middle East and is finally doing the work that she believes is going to make an impact in the world at scale, or more, basically making making the most contribution that she believes she can make at this point in her life, which is back to making a difference. And so that's what's bringing people, is like, there's something in me that's not being unleashed, and it's either an ego move of, I want to own my stamp in the world and I want my name to have currency, or I want to make a difference, and often both together, of like, I want to be recognized as someone who stands up in the community, who shows up with their full self. So it's sort of like a willingness, and then the discipline have to be there. Otherwise, it's just going to be a bunch of talk.
Right. And I know, Shar, you through your coaching practice and helping people find their passion in HR and also within your business, you've done you utilize a lot of these methods. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I also do career coaching, and I think it all started back when I was in college and I took some kind of personality assessment, and they told me that I should be a police officer, which I certainly, I appreciate the service of the police officers, so please don't take this in any way, but I don't think I'm, assertive enough, I guess you could say. But ultimately I ended up in HR, and we were just joking earlier that kind of ended up being kind of like a police officer kind of role anyway. And then I decided I wanted to kind of shift and get in, as you call it, shapeshift, or get into talent management strategy. So I finally decided to go into get my master's degree and do that. Fast forward about, 50, 70 years. No, I'm sorry, not 50, 70 years. I was laid off from a big healthcare system, and it was pretty devastating because I had like multiple personal things that were happening, including buying a house, and my mom passed away, and all kinds of things all in the same month. And so it was at that moment I decided, okay, guess what? We're going to start our own company. We're going to start our own company, and we're going to run the company the way I think the perfect talent management strategist would run the company. And since I've been working with Sam and colleagues here, my company is flourishing. My employees know that I'm very passionate about what I call career mobility, in supporting their desires, their dreams, their passions. And we have promoted many of our employees to either a management role, but we've also created other roles such as a manager of compliancy, or an executive assistant position, or a director of administration. And so the model has been shifting, as you say, Jonas, as far as really honing in on each of my employees' passions and what they do best. And I get feedback constantly right now that my employees just love their job. In fact, one of our employees was going to school to be an epidemiologist. And needless to say, even though she's going to graduate with her degree, she wants to stay with us because we really are a dream job for her, and probably will make as much as she would make in her field. So anyway, I could tell you on and on, but I've used the TMA method, and that's one of our sponsors, as you notice here. And it really opens up that open, honest dialogue about passions, interest, what people really truly want to do, to wake up every morning and not drive to work with something that I call the white knuckle syndrome. I remember when I was a baby HR coordinator, when I first started my first HR job, and I had a long commute. I mean, I drive like an hour or 53 minutes. And I remember this white knuckle syndrome as I was driving home, and I realized, my eye was twitching, I was stressed out, I was anxious because we had such high turnover at this grocery distribution company. And I realized, oh my gosh, maybe this is not really what I'm very passionate about.
Yeah.
So now I just don't want to be an employer like that. We have near 30 employees, and I want my employees to absolutely love their job, have balance in their life, and be able to do what they do best each and every day. And that's our motto. Mm-hmm. And it's been working out great.
Well, I know, as Shar, you have went on that journey of finding meaning, and like Jonas is talking about, finding meaning, finding a way to have impact on the world. And I know a big thing for you is HR with a heart, and having a healthy workplace, and you do that through the Rocky Mountain Health Advocates. And so, Jonas, I mean, in your coaching and so forth, and how do you help people understand where they can find that meaning and impact upon the world that makes their job so important, or that future path for them?
Yeah, I mean, there's 1,000 personality tests out there. Two that I'm a fan of are the Enneagram and the Big Five personality tests. If anyone wants to drop those, we can drop those links around. That's helpful. Like, okay, so I'm an introvert or an extrovert, or I'm open-minded. But getting gifts of feedback from people to say, you'd be great at this. Like Jules had someone say, you could try this out. And you're like, trying it on is such a great way. And in companies that are very large, the question could be, is it safe to try? So what harm will this do, and what can we learn? So one thing I found is interesting is first an acknowledgement and a noticing. Say, I love this white knuckle syndrome and Chardonnay. 3 minutes. Like, it's very precise. So you're like, is that who I want to be? Not, is that what I want to do? Do I want to be that person who comes home and has to like take a bath for an hour just to normalize so that I can show up to talk to another human? So that's an acknowledgement. And obviously, a lot of this is with the lens of having the ability or to be fortunate enough to entertain these things, which is in many ways, I think, a duty, because if you can, you should. And then the other thing is the large organizations, the telecommunications companies, the big pharma, the big tech, it's very hard to see your meaningful progress when you're a cog in the machine. So there are certain people that are in this environment where what's going on is they are making an impact, but it's 0.00001. And then you hit eject and Shar sets up this flourishing company. And every day she gets an email or she can see it on someone's face that she's creating a livelihood, that that person is nourished by their work, that their relationships are thriving. And she can say, you know what, I couldn't be doing anything else.
Mhm.
So then she becomes the model for her children and for other people to say, I can have that too. There's a new
Right.
book that's coming by this amazing woman. It's called like Everyone Should Be a Millionaire, something like that.
Yeah.
And one of the people I coach, his wife is reading it. And I was like, it's so crazy because this book came into my life of like, there's a certain portion of the world, these are usually young women who are a minority, who are like, no, that's not me. Like, I don't deserve that, or that's never going to happen. And then all of a sudden they start seeing people in their community or people that look like them who are, and it becomes possible. So a lot of this is modeling behavior, and it's from leaders to parents to peers.
That's great. Well, another thing you mentioned, as far as for a person to be able to shape their future, you talk about having the vital ingredients in your. Can you tell us a little bit more about what those vital ingredients are?
Yeah, I wonder if I remember them all, but one of them is so ingredients is ingredients, and we can also link to that chapter if you want. It's online. One of them is intuiting, having the intuition. So not getting caught up in your intellectual brain, but feeling it in your heart and gut. So like this conversation feels dynamic. It feels alive. It doesn't feel contrived. And it felt like that last time. But I've been on some of these where it's like question, answer, and it's like, okay, what's the next question? So, you know it. So that's like, are you in the right ballpark in terms of your career? Let's think of another one. VIT, ingredients. INGRED. I'm drawing a blank. Let me look at it quickly, and actually I can run through. I've got the book here.
Yeah, show us your book too, Jonas.
Yeah, well, it's funny because my aunt, as she's a big fan because she just read the book, and she's had me send all the books to people all over the world. And so I'm down to my last book. So it's just the actual book, like there's no cover, but that's really good. Okay, so the vital ingredients was an acronym, and ingredients is the word. So there's 11. So intuiting is the first one. And then noting is the second one, which is what people do in meditation. So it's like that thought, I don't have any control over that scenario. Like the vaccine's being rolled out in America, like it or not. And there's going to be a common vaccine passport. Now, what can you have control over? Maybe you get your kids vaxxed, maybe you don't. Maybe you move to Mexico. I don't know if Char's in Mexico anymore, but
I just got back last week.
Oh, welcome back. Okay. Giving, this is what we were just talking about. So feeling like you're showing up as a giver, not a taker. Relating, there's a whole theory about relational energy. Some work environments are toxic. And the reason why they're toxic is because often people are in a fear-based mode. They're anxious. So they're bringing that to the work, then they're bringing it back home, rinse and repeat and bringing it back. And we know what that looks like. And once you taste that and you can get out of it, you never go back. Expanding, so seeing the world with wide eyes and seeing possibility and expanding your horizon versus contracting. Discerning, so being discerning with your time, attention, and energy, which are your sort of biggest commodities. Integrating, giving life a myriad of projects so that we are valued both for the work that we do and working on ourselves. A lot of people say, I got to do the work. Well, it's like, Are you talking about the work on your relationship, the work in your garden, working on your kids, working on your body? Work is like the ubiquitous term. Expressing, we've already talked about. Navigating, the tenacity to engage with the unknown and constantly stretch our capabilities. COVID has said, what is your ability to navigate change? And it's like, either it sucks or it's great, but that's a skill to have. Trusting, everything breaks down without trust. So
Yeah.
trusting your colleagues, trusting yourself. And the last one is very much like intuiting, it's sensing. At the individual, collective, and global level, appreciating what's needed in any given moment, and then having the audacity to show up wholeheartedly. So that makes ingredients. And it was just a nice way to kind of bring in all of these things I was thinking about when I was writing this. Is like, you don't necessarily have all of those at 100%, but maybe you've got different weights, and knowing where you are in terms of your currency and how indispensable you are from a talent point of view, that's going to bring you confidence, and confidence and competence are natural bedfellows.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there. One thing, and so let's just pull out a few things there, my favorites. So one is, you mentioned was giving. So I find this so important and also so dangerous because, I'm actually in business, so I'm trying to, make a living for myself, but I love to give. I love to and so I love to talk to people and help them solve their issues and so forth and give. And I find that what I found in my career is that if you find something that you do where you just love to give and give and give, I mean, that's a sign that you're doing something with passion. That's what you love to do. It's like, I would do it for free. If I didn't get paid for what I do, I would do it for free. And it's great. So, and I don't know much more to say about that, but I found that something that really resonated with me in your ingredients.
Yeah. And also, I said to someone yesterday, I'm a recovering people pleaser. So when you start with the give and someone's like, can I borrow your brain? Or can I pick your brain? Can I ask you something? And you jump. Or a family member is like, can you help me? And they haven't even thought through what it is they need help with. Like, can you go to Costco and pick up some, shoes? And you're like, and you're driving there and you're like, why am I doing this? So I had to learn about being discerning with it. It's a two-way street. So giving with an abundance mindset and with your whole self, versus giving with an agenda of getting somewhere down the road, or giving too much such that you burn out, or you're actually your inner resources are depleted. So I love that idea of, like, let's just say in Sam's wheelhouse, 30% can be pro bono giving, and you do it, and 70% is like, I got to earn a living and put food on the table and pay taxes and blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm. But I also think that the giving also leads into the trust you're talking about, because when you're giving, you're giving with authenticity and with knowledge, and you're sharing something that you have that you can help others with. And so there's this authenticity there that fosters trust, which I think is so important in that mix.
I love how you're seeing all over the world, like with Glassdoor and stuff, of like, businesses are transparent now. I was like, when the hell were they not supposed to be? Like,
that is funny.
We're like offshoring our taxes in the Cayman Islands or in Delaware, like whether it was Starbucks or someone else. And now, especially a younger generation, in 2 seconds, whether it's a commercial, Instagram, or Glassdoor, they've got a pretty good sense check of like, is this company full of hot water, full of hot air, or hot water?
Well, my company is extremely transparent, almost to the point of default. And it's just kind of the personality of our CEO. And I'm always the one going, wait, we just started talking to our partner, blah, blah, blah. But in a way, at least our employees know, particularly during the COVID and the risk of potential shutdown. I've had employees say, the reason why we hung in there with you is because you're extremely transparent, that we are facing a lockdown, and that you're doing everything that you can do to get the PPP grant or loan to make sure our employees are being paid. And a lot of companies did not do that, is what I'm hearing, because they didn't take the time. So I think there's pros and cons of being too transparent, But since we have such a volatile, well, I call it a volatile kind of type of business model that's constantly changing on a daily, every day there's a new change, every day. And all we can do is constantly communicate what the changes are, what's happening with the laboratories, what's happening with the teledoctor type of format. And our employees now can relax a bit because they'll be like, well, at least they'll always tell me what's around the corner, so I don't have to constantly worry what the secrets are.
And so that's one thing. I mean, you're talking about, Shar, about things changing and you're adapting to those changes and so forth. But I think that another thing you talk about, Jonas, is packaging your story, and it seems like you have a certain vision or mission in your practice, Shar, and is that what you mean by packaging your story, as far as coming up with that story of why you like to do the thing you like to do, what your talents and so forth? Can you tell us a little bit more about that, Jonas?
I mean, our brains are wired for narration. I mean, when I was telling you guys about my dad's talk, and it's going to be about caring for the elders.
Yeah.
And my uncle got dementia, and he was a San Francisco dentist, golfer, all of this stuff. It's a wonderful story. He'd walk into a room, he'd laugh, and the whole room would laugh. One of those people. So my dad has this memo of like 4 pages, and he's like reading it. And I go, you're not telling the story. You're showing up with facts. So if you look at like data with soul is taking the data and saying, what's interesting? Oh, it turns out that 70% of our staff love how transparent we are, and 30% don't because it makes them uncomfortable. And then you can make a decision, and you'd stick with, let's say, let's make those people uncomfortable. And if we use Zappos as an example, they'll quit and they'll go somewhere else. But the 70% will become evangelists. So storytelling becomes not only useful from a branding point of view, but it is, and Jules will know this, super important from the brand Inc. that everyone is their own business now. Like, assuming you're breathing and you're in the Western world, arguably you're your own business, whether you're incorporated or not. And how you tell your story is how the world will hopefully understand or even appreciate your talents.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't, you're doing a disservice to yourself and to them, because they'll never find you. So, the whole marketing funnel of like awareness, consideration, and purchase, it applies to Sam. And it's kind of hard. I mean, one person I really like, she had a talk, and it said, don't think of it as selling, think of it as sharing.
Yeah.
So you are making an impact and you are giving. I do that with coaching. I'm like, I might not be the good coach for you, but if I am, we're going to have some fun, and you're going to be challenged and provoked. And then you'll probably go on to have another coach, or maybe you will stop with that for a while and integrate and then find someone else. So storytelling has just become so necessary in every facet of life.
Right. And I like the concept of having fun on the way. I had a previous business partner, and we went to this coaching session, and through this coaching session, the coach brought out, it's like he was all focused on the destination, the getting there and the wealth and stuff like this. And I was like, I'm on the journey, man. I want to have fun as I go. I want to do stuff and all. And so we realized that we were on 2 completely different paths, and so we separated ways. But that's I think that's part of understanding the story as well, where we're really looking for in our lives and so forth. And I think you tell a story in your book that just sets it up marvelously about what it means to be a shaper and so forth. And I know you're a big surf enthusiast. Will you tell us a little bit about the concept of shaping the board, and how that comes out to a person's life and how they're shaped their future?
I mean, this is made by Manny, the guy who's making my next surfboard. He makes speakers now. So this is actually a prototype, and then here would be your speaker.
Oh, cool.
And he's been making them in many ways to scratch a creative itch, to figure it out. And then at some point, like this very cool coffee shop in New York and another hotel in San Diego was like, can you make those speakers for us? So his passion turned into, to use Jules' term, something that was monetized. Now, not everything needs to be monetized. And he started with the process and with the journey of discovery, of learning, of tinkering. And same with his surfboard shaping. So he was working at, I guess it's REI. You guys know what REI is, the
Yeah.
mountain company. And he had a story there, but the story goes that he was like, I'm not going to end up working here for my life. There's got to be something else for me. And so he tried to make this quad fish surfboard from the 70s that has a little fish at the end mouth that has a different feeling on the wave. And he rode it in Half Moon Bay outside of San Francisco. And all of the surfers were laughing at him because they're like, what kind of wacky board is that? But then they saw him surfing, and this guy is so graceful. And so they're like, hey, can you make me one of those? That's pretty cool. And so he made a board for the other guy and the other guy. And now him and his wife have a thriving, she has her own surf company, a surfboard shaping company, and so does he. And when I was trying to find a person to epitomize or exemplify a shaper, I was like, well, there's no other person that I know who exemplifies that, because he is a surfboard shaper. So I went and I tried to get his story, and he was very reluctant because he's one of those people who's so humble. He doesn't really want that story told. And I was like, you kind of need to, like, you don't really have a choice because I'm going to tell it anyway. And so that story is, once he found how he could put his stamp and inject himself into his work, what happens is he doesn't even make surfboards for shops anymore. He only makes them for individuals, like Jonah Hill, the actor. So he'll come to Shar and he'll be like, okay, what kind of body type do you have? Do you want a longboard or shortboard? What is the waves like at your local beach? And then boom, you've got this board that was like made for you. And it's sort of like, I don't know, it's a labor of love, right? And the price is actually not even an issue. Like, whether it's $600 or $1,000, it's like, whatever, like you're doing it because you need to. So anyway, so I co-opted that term and I democratized it so anyone could be a shaper, meaning you can apply the same methodology and approach and mindset to your work.
Well, I'm glad that there's going to be a surfboard for us short people.
I didn't even know the story, but some short people want longboards, some tall people want shortboards, some people want shortboards. But it's also a good metaphor. A friend of mine was saying about COVID being like the ocean, and some of the waves would be very gnarly, and you get hit with lockdown, and oh my God, is this? And then all of a sudden it's like a ripple, and you're like, oh, it's calmed down, and so the metaphor of surfing is also really appropriate for these times of navigation, patience, balance, versatility, and there's a lot of articles out there of like the surfer mindset has always been a little bit of like a dropout and, anti-establishment, but it's also about being able to adapt quickly.
Mm-hmm. Well, the funniest thing is that my dog, Aspen, my white German Shepherd, yes, she's a surfer. So she literally, it's funny.
Dog?
Well, she hasn't gotten on a board yet, but she like times when the waves hit perfectly, like when they kind of crest in, and then she stands there and kind of watches it, and then she swims out, gets the ball, and then she literally rides the wave back onto the beach.
That's great. A body surfer.
She might be able to be. Maybe we need to get a board made for a dog.
Talk to Manny. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, the one thing that I like about that conversation, Jonas, is that crafting a board for your environment, not just for yourself, but for the environment that you're in. And I noticed that I'm a big skier, a snow skier. I like to do this, and so I have like 7 pairs of skis. There's one that I like that I use for the type of skiing I like, and I use that probably 70% of the time. But then I go out in the backcountry and I'm skiing on some cruddy snow or at certain times of the year, and I need to use a different board for that to be able to perform my best. And so I use that board for that. And so I think that's another thing that we can probably draw a parallel into work life, is that there might be our most favorite environment, but sometimes we have those tasks that we have to adapt to, that we need a different tool or a different shape or a different vehicle. And so that allow us to perform best in that situation. And I think coming up with a narrative or a style for those types of situations are important. So would you agree? Did you ever see any of that in those people that you coach, or that they have the things that they love to do, but sometimes those things have little elements of things that they're maybe not the best at, or things that they adapt to?
Yeah, I mean, I studied philosophy, and the first book was actually, well, the first assignment was Genesis, in the Bible, but then the next one was Plato's Republic, and it had the born dung sweeper should stay that, and the born philosopher should stay that. And I was like really agitated by that, of like, no, what if you want to be an opera singer and you have a terrible voice? But I think to that point is like, okay, so finding your talents and bumping into them doesn't necessarily mean you need to make those a commodity. But when you have an itch to do something, like, let's say, just use Jules again, let's pick on her to pick up the violin. Like, why not pick up the violin, become an amateur, become a professional amateur, and have that feed how you show up the next day when you come into work, because you just played with the local orchestra. Surfing, I'm never going to be a professional surfer, but there's been times when I catch a wave and I am, in many ways, they talk about flow states. There's nowhere else that I am. Because it's almost sometimes life or death. Like, you mess up and you might be underwater for the next 2 minutes. Or for skiing, like you see a piste and you're like, so where does that? You face your fear, you lean into that, and then next day at work, there's an awkward conversation or a hard conversation to have. That's peanuts. It's like no big deal. So I don't look at it. I look at, my friend Manny would say, it's a Mandela. And the parts of those that do not pay, or the parts that you're just an amateur and you're not that great at, but you really just enjoy doing, who am I to tell you not to do those things?
Great. Well, I know we're coming towards the top of the hour, so it's been a great conversation. So I invite anybody that has questions to please bring those up for Jonas. And while we're waiting for those questions, I just want to have another word for our sponsor here, TMA Method. And so the TMA method is a great tool for us to learn a little bit about ourselves and to learn a little bit about the people that work for us or we interact with. And so basically, it's a tool that shows their talents or their work preferences and so forth. And really it's just there to create a dialogue and so we can learn a little bit about each other and our passions and the way we like to work. So it's a great tool. If you'd like to try out the TMA method or also have a little bit of time with any of us here on the call, you can feel free to go ahead and use this. If you're on the Zoom platform, go ahead and you can use this poll to sign up for some time. Or if you're on any of the other platforms, such as LinkedIn or LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube, or anything like that, feel free just to reach out and send me an email at sam@compteam.net, and I'll be happy to set up that time with you or with anybody on our panel here. I also would like to bring attention to our next week's speaker. Here is going to be our very own Shar. And Jonas, as Jonas was saying, Shar was in Mexico not too long ago. And Shar was actually managing her company from afar, and which I think is a new model that inspires a lot of us to be able to manage from wherever we're at or in our favorite location. If you can be on a beachfront managing your staff, why not? So Shar is going to tell us a little bit about her experiences and how we can learn from that on our next session on the People Strategy Forum. So join us next week. So let's return to our conversation at hand. Jules, do we have any questions that came up as far as for Jonas?
Everyone's a little quiet this morning. I don't think we have any questions that have popped up. I think people have just been taking in all this. There's been so much great information. I'm like trying to take mental notes of everything. So yeah, if anyone has any last minute questions, feel free to pop them in the chat, because we only have Jonas with us for a few more minutes.
And so I have a question for you, Jonas. I mean, in getting started, I mean, let's say that our listeners out there, somebody's inspired by this and says, hey, I've been in this crummy career for too long, or COVID has totally changed my job, and I don't like it anymore. What are the next steps that they should take?
Yeah. I mean, everyone is unique and there's no one size fits all. Some people can job craft, and that's looking at their relationships at work. That's looking at their actual work activity. So maybe they move from marketing to HR, or from HR to marketing in the same company or the same industry. Or maybe they just need a vacation and go to Mexico and watch their dog surf and then come back and be like, "Oh." So that's a lot of stuff I do, just turning the job you have into one you love. Other people actually are in the wrong job, and no matter what they do, they're putting lipstick on the pig, and they got to change. So, I have a bias towards autonomy in work, and there's not that many companies, maybe Shar's organization, and more tech-oriented companies and companies that have adapted in the last year to give more agency to people. And if that's the case, that's the first thing that is the motivation in work. Second one is challenge, and the third is purpose. And if you get all of those, you're winning. Like you're in effect energized by your work. It's very hard for organizations to provide that uniformly to everyone, because everyone has different thresholds. So that's why setting up on your own or working for sort of a micro or sort of a family run business can create a sense of joy and of contribution, but not necessarily only. I mean, people work for Google and Apple and they love it and they are making a big difference. So yeah, I try to coach, which is what's important to you. What does that look like? What's at stake if you don't do that? If not now, when? And just have like a series of questions that are just, at some point I could almost, someone put in the comments, artificial intelligence. I could almost throw out the next question as an algorithm and then be like, oh, I haven't thought about that. And then they just talk and I'm taking a nap. But obviously the whole beauty is everyone has a different personality, and to be sensitive. Both what I want is to see them flourish, but my agenda has to be held passively. Back to you and your ex-business partner, you were enjoying the process, that he wanted to get to the destination. I want to enjoy the journey with that person and not be so eager and impatient to try and accelerate to get to, okay, I'm now in joyful work or meaningful work. You're not seeing work as a practice. You're seeing it as like, okay, I've got the title, I got the business card, I got the corner office. That's not going to tick a box for a lot of people. That's a temporary metric.
Yeah, great stuff, Jonas. It's been a great conversation. So tell me, how can our listeners learn a little bit more about you and the coaching programs that you provide?
Sure. If they want to do one-to-one coaching, they can head over to jonasaltman.com. And I think Jules put the coaching program and the book is at shapers.life. And before COVID, I would go into industries, I'd go into companies and I would rattle the cage. And I still do that sometimes, but that's socialfabric.com. And I bring shapers together there and we try to instigate change using facilitation, coaching, and often consulting in a way that creates a cascading effect. So yeah, I'm always open to having new conversations. So please reach out.
Great. Well, once again, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Jonas, for joining us once again. It's great. Yes. I love having these conversations with you because you're so insightful and there's just so interesting going through your experience and listening to what you have to share. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm grateful to be involved. Thanks for thinking of me again. Samit, I hope you are healthy, speedy recovery, and have a great day wherever you are. Take care.
All right. Take care. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.